This woman's name is Cassidy, and she's 32 years old. Right now, she's sitting alone in her apartment, wondering why everyone calls her heartless. She wants you to know her side of the story. She wants you to understand that even though she was intimate with 3 different men during her marriage, she believes she never truly betrayed her husband. Not in the way that matters, she says. Not where it counts. I'm Emma, and today on Mrs. Emma, I'm bringing you a story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about loyalty, marriage, and what it means to truly abandon someone. Cassidy had been with Griffin for 8 years total. They'd been married for 4 of those years. To anyone looking from the outside, they had everything figured out. A beautiful home in Phoenix, reliable cars in the driveway, stable careers. Their social media painted a picture of couple goals, dinner parties, weekend getaways, anniversary posts with heart emojis. But Cassidy says that behind the filtered photos and smiling selfies, her marriage had become a hollow shell. She describes coming home each evening to a man who had stopped seeing her. Griffin would walk through the door after work, give her a brief nod, and immediately disappear into his phone. Hour after hour, he'd scroll through screens while she sat nearby, feeling invisible. Their conversations had shrunk down to the bare minimum. How was work? What should we eat? That was it. Nothing deeper, nothing real. Cassidy tried to share her day with him. She'd talk about her projects, her frustrations, the things that made her laugh, but Griffin's responses were automatic, robotic. That's nice. His eyes never left his screen. She could have been talking to the wall. The loneliness, Cassidy says, became unbearable. She describes their date nights with particular pain. They'd sit on the couch together, a show playing on the television that she'd chosen. But Griffin wasn't watching. He was scrolling through his phone, his face lit by the cold blue glow, his thumb moving endlessly, up, up, up. She'd glance over at him, hoping he'd look back. He never did. Their intimate life had become mechanical, scheduled, predictable. She says it felt like checking off a task on a to-do list rather than connecting with another human being. Once a week, maybe, no passion, no emotion, just routine. When Cassidy would try to tell Griffin she needed more attention, more affection, more presence, he'd become defensive. He'd say work was stressful. He'd say she was expecting too much. He'd make her feel like wanting to be noticed by her own husband was asking for something unreasonable. Meanwhile, she kept track. She made his favorite meals. She remembered every important date. She supported his career moves. She managed their entire social calendar. And she got nothing in return. Not even basic acknowledgement. The moment that shattered everything came when their anniversary approached. Cassidy mentioned that perhaps they should plan something special. Griffin looked up from his phone with genuine confusion on his face. Wait, that's this month? He asked. That's when she knew. She wasn't just lonely. She was truly alone. She was married to someone who had forgotten she existed. The resentment began to build like pressure in a sealed container. She noticed everything now. How he never helped with household tasks unless she asked multiple times. How he made plans with his friends without consulting her, but questioned her when she wanted to go out. How he spent money freely on his hobbies, but scrutinized every purchase she made. The double standard was crushing. And the worst part? In public, Griffin transformed. Around their friends, he became charming, attentive, the perfect husband. Then the moment they got in the car to drive home, the mask would drop. Silence, phone scrolling, indifference. Cassidy felt like a ghost haunting her own life. She met Marcus at a professional conference. He was about 10 years older than her, successful, well-spoken. But what caught Cassidy's attention wasn't his resume. It was the way he listened. When she spoke, he made eye contact. When she shared an idea, he asked follow-up questions. He remembered details from their conversations days later. For the first time in months, Cassidy felt like her words mattered to someone. They got drinks after one of the conference sessions. Marcus was attentive in ways that made her heart ache with recognition of what she'd been missing. He made her laugh. He made her feel intelligent. He made her feel seen. When he suggested dinner the next evening, Cassidy said yes immediately. She told herself it was networking, just professional courtesy. But in her heart, she knew it was something more, and she didn't care. That night, Marcus walked her back to her hotel room. There was a moment at the door where they both knew what came next. Cassidy didn't feel guilty. She felt alive. She spent the night with him, and it was everything her marriage wasn't: passionate, connected, present. Someone was actually there with her, engaged with her, seeing her as a person instead of an obligation. The next morning, Cassidy expected shame to crash over her. Instead, she felt energized. She felt like herself again. When she returned home, Griffin barely looked up. "How was the trip?" he asked while making coffee, his eyes already drifting to his phone. That's when it hit her. He wouldn't have noticed if she'd been gone for weeks. Marcus started texting her regularly. At first, the messages were about work. Then they became more personal. He'd send her articles he thought she'd enjoy. He'd ask about her day. He'd remember the presentation she was nervous about, the difficult client she'd mentioned. It was such a stark contrast to Griffin, who couldn't remember anything about her life at all. Those text conversations with Marcus became the highlight of Cassidy's days. He made her feel smart, interesting, valued. All the things she used to feel before marriage had turned her into someone who was taken for granted. When Marcus suggested meeting up during another business trip, Cassidy didn't hesitate. This time, she didn't lie to herself about what it was. She knew exactly what she wanted, and what she wanted was to feel desired again. Cassidy began to build a framework in her mind. Griffin had stopped being a husband in every way except legally. He'd checked out emotionally. He'd abandoned their intimacy. He'd made it clear through his actions that she wasn't a priority. So why should his feelings be her priority? If he was going to act single, ignoring her, treating her like furniture, then why couldn't she feel what it was like to be pursued by someone who actually cared? Marcus never made her feel dramatic for wanting attention. He never made her feel like she was asking for too much. He made her feel normal for wanting connection with someone she was close to. A few months into her relationship with Marcus, Cassidy met Trevor at a friend's birthday party. Griffin had canceled at the last minute, claiming he was too tired from work. This had become typical. He never wanted to go anywhere that required actual effort or social engagement. So Cassidy went alone. Trevor was charming, sophisticated, about 12 years her senior. He owned his own business. He'd traveled extensively. He had stories that made her life with Griffin seem small and suffocating by comparison. While Griffin spent his evenings on the couch playing video games, here was a man who had actually lived. Trevor was attentive throughout the party. He brought her drinks. He introduced her to interesting people. He made sure she was having a good time. It was everything going to events with Griffin wasn't. Griffin would find a corner, stare at his phone, and make it obvious he wanted to leave. When Trevor asked for her number, Cassidy gave it without hesitation. When she got home that night, Griffin was already asleep on the couch, television still playing. He hadn't even bothered to ask how the party was. Around the same time, Cassidy reconnected with David, someone she'd known in college who had recently moved back to town after his divorce. They started as friends. At least that's what she told herself. David understood what it felt like to be unappreciated. His ex-wife had treated him the way Griffin treated Cassidy, like he was just there to provide stability while she lived her life without considering his feelings. David was probably 15 years older than Cassidy. He'd been through therapy after his divorce. He could actually talk about emotions and relationships. He could discuss problems without shutting down. With Griffin, any attempt to discuss their issues got dismissed immediately. She was overthinking. She was being too sensitive. She was asking for too much. David validated her. He listened. He made her feel heard. So now Cassidy had 3 men giving her different pieces of what she wasn't getting at home. Marcus provided intellectual stimulation and professional respect. Trevor offered excitement and sophistication. David gave her emotional connection and understanding. Meanwhile, Griffin gave her nothing except financial security and the legal status of being married. Cassidy began to question why she was supposed to get all her needs met by one person who clearly wasn't interested in meeting any of them. Why was Griffin allowed to coast along, getting all the benefits of having a wife without putting in any effort? Managing 3 relationships while being married turned out to be easier than she expected, mainly because Griffin was so checked out that he wouldn't have noticed if she'd disappeared for days. She had Marcus for work trips and professional events, Trevor for weekend afternoons when Griffin thought she was running errands, David for evening coffee dates when Griffin was busy with his own activities. The hardest part wasn't the logistics. It was coming home to Griffin after being with men who actually tried. The contrast was painful. She'd returned from an amazing dinner with Trevor, feeling beautiful and alive, only to walk into a house where Griffin was sprawled on the couch in old clothes, barely glancing up to acknowledge her presence. Or she'd come back from a deep, meaningful conversation with David, and Griffin would ask her nothing about her evening except maybe, "Can you grab me something while you're up?" It made Cassidy realize how much she'd been accepting scraps while convincing herself all marriages were like this. These other men showed her what it felt like to be pursued, to be appreciated, to be prioritized. They planned actual dates. They remembered what she told them. They asked about her feelings. They made her feel like spending time with her was the best part of their day, not some obligation they had to fulfill. Griffin hadn't planned a real date in over 2 years. He couldn't remember the last book she'd read or show she'd mentioned. He treated conversations with her like interruptions. The intimate aspects with these 3 men were incredible too, not just physically, but emotionally. They were present, engaged, focused on her happiness. It was completely different from what she had with Griffin, where everything felt obligatory, like he was just going through the motions to keep her from complaining. With Marcus, Trevor, and David, she felt desired. She felt beautiful. She felt worth the effort. Cassidy started taking better care of herself, working out more, buying nicer clothes, getting her hair done regularly. Griffin never noticed any of it, which just confirmed what she already knew. He wasn't paying attention to anything about her life, but the other men noticed. They appreciated the effort. It felt incredible to dress up for someone who would actually comment on how she looked, instead of walking past her like she was furniture. After a while, it all started to feel normal. She had her work life with Marcus, her social life with Trevor, her emotional support system with David, and then she had her home life with Griffin, which felt like the least important part of her world. He was just the person she happened to live with and share bills with, not someone who added value or joy to her daily experience. Cassidy wasn't feeling guilty anymore. What was she betraying, really? A man who acted like she didn't exist? A marriage where she was the only one trying to maintain any connection? Griffin had abandoned their relationship emotionally and physically long before she started seeing other people. She was just finally doing something about it instead of waiting for him to remember he had a wife. Everything collapsed on a random Tuesday night. Griffin picked up Cassidy's phone to check the time because his was charging in the bedroom. She'd gotten careless with her messages. After almost a year of living this double life without problems, she'd gotten comfortable. Griffin never looked at her phone, never questioned her schedule, never seemed suspicious. But that night, a text from Trevor appeared right as Griffin held the phone. It was explicit. Something about how much he'd enjoyed their afternoon together and couldn't wait to see her again. Griffin stared at the message. Then he started scrolling. Up through weeks of flirty texts, plans to meet, obvious references to their physical relationship. Then he went into her other messages. Found Marcus, found David. Cassidy watched his expression change as he read. She could see him trying to process what was right there in front of him. Like it had genuinely never occurred to him that she might be getting attention from other men while he ignored her every single day. When he finally looked at her, he was completely shocked. Griffin started asking questions. His voice was shaking. How long? Who were these men? Had she been sleeping with all of them? He looked genuinely hurt, which honestly surprised Cassidy. What did he expect? You can't treat your wife like she's invisible for years and then act devastated when she finds people who actually want to spend time with her. She tried to explain. She'd been lonely, disconnected. She'd tried to talk to him about their problems so many times, and he'd dismissed her concerns. He'd made her feel like wanting basic attention from her own husband was asking for too much. She reminded him of all the nights he'd chosen his phone over conversation, all the times he'd forgotten important things about her life, all the ways he'd made her feel like she didn't matter. But Griffin couldn't hear it. He just kept focusing on the cheating. He couldn't grasp that this wasn't something that happened out of nowhere. It was the result of months of being neglected and taken for granted. She wasn't some terrible person who decided to hurt him for fun. She was a woman who had tried everything to get her husband's attention and had finally given up and found it elsewhere. The argument lasted for hours. Griffin kept acting like he was the innocent victim. Cassidy kept trying to make him understand his role in what had led to this. I can't believe you did this to us, he kept saying. How could you throw away our marriage? But where was that concern for their marriage when she was literally begging him to spend time with her? Where was that investment when she was trying to get him to engage with her about anything deeper than household logistics? Finally, Cassidy told him the truth she knew he wouldn't understand. She'd been mentally loyal the entire time. Her heart, her commitment to their marriage, it had never wavered. Even when she was with other men physically, emotionally, and mentally, she was still his wife. Still trying to make their relationship work. Still hoping he'd step up. These other relationships were just filling the gaps he'd left empty through his neglect. She'd never stopped wanting him to be the husband she needed. She'd just stopped waiting around for it while getting nothing. Griffin couldn't understand the concept of mental loyalty. He said it was the stupidest thing he'd ever heard. Cheating was cheating, no matter what was going on in her head or heart. But Cassidy says he was missing the point completely. She never stopped loving him. She never stopped wanting their marriage to work. Everything she did was because she was trying to get her needs met so she could be a better wife to him. Not because she wanted to leave or destroy what they'd built. If he'd been paying attention, if he'd been making even basic effort, none of this would have happened. The weeks after their confrontation were exhausting. Suddenly, Griffin wanted to talk about everything, wanted to spend time together, wanted to work on their relationship. But it felt fake to Cassidy, desperate. Like he was only interested in fixing things now that he realized other men found her attractive enough to pursue. Where was this energy when she was begging for attention? His sudden interest felt more like jealousy and possessiveness than genuine love. He started asking her to quit her job so she wouldn't see Marcus. Wanted her to block Trevor and David everywhere. He wanted to control her entire social life. But he wasn't addressing the underlying issues. He wasn't talking about how to be more emotionally available or how to make her feel valued. He was just focused on keeping her away from other men. Like that would fix the emptiness she'd been feeling for years. Cassidy tried to explain that she needed him to understand why this happened, not just prevent it from happening again through monitoring. She needed him to acknowledge his role, to commit to actually changing his behavior. But every conversation turned into him being the victim, and her being the terrible person who'd betrayed him and destroyed their perfect marriage. He couldn't see past his hurt to understand that she'd been hurting too, for much longer than he had. Eventually, Cassidy realized they were never going to get past this. Griffin was never going to take responsibility for his part in destroying their connection over the years. He wanted her to apologize and grovel and promise never to stray again. But he didn't want to examine how his neglect had created the situation. So, when he said he wanted a divorce, she didn't fight it. Honestly, she felt relieved. Now Cassidy is single and dating. She says it's amazing compared to what she was dealing with before. She can see whoever she wants without sneaking around or feeling guilty about getting her needs met. She doesn't have to come home to someone who makes her feel invisible. The men she's seeing appreciate her and make an effort, which is exactly what she deserves and should have been getting all along. Griffin has tried reaching out a few times, probably realizing what he lost now that it's too late. But Cassidy is done settling for someone who only cares about her when it's convenient or when they're afraid of losing her. She learned that she's worth more than being someone's afterthought. She deserves to be with people who are excited to spend time with her, who remember what she tells them, who make her feel valued. Griffin had years to figure that out. He chose not to. Now he gets to deal with the consequences of taking her for granted for so long. So what do you think about Cassidy's story? Was she justified in seeking connection elsewhere when her marriage had become emotionally empty? Or does physical infidelity always override any claims of mental loyalty? Can someone truly be loyal in their heart while being unfaithful in their actions? Or is that just a rationalization for betrayal? Did Griffin's neglect create the situation? Or was Cassidy responsible for either fixing the marriage through honest communication or ending it before involving other people? These are complicated questions without easy answers. What I know is this: relationships require effort from both people. When one person stops trying, stops seeing their partner, stops showing up, something breaks. Sometimes it breaks slowly, quietly, until the damage is already done. And sometimes the person who got left behind in their own marriage makes choices that hurt everyone involved. I'm Emma, and this is Mrs. Emma. If this story made you think, if it made you feel something, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. and subscribe to our channel so you never miss the stories that make us question what we think we know about love, loyalty, and the complicated truth of human relationships. What would you have done in Cassidy's situation? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.